Never. Do you hear me? Never in your life even think about entering abandoned temples that are no longer in use. Get that idea out of your head, even at first it seems harmless. Don't repeat my mistakes. My story won't be long, simply because I don't have much time. But the time you are hearing this, I'll most likely already be dead. The thing I awakened, the thing I should never have disturbed, will have taken me to another world. I live in a small village in Ukraine, a country in Eastern Europe. Everything I'm about to tell you happened here. It all started as part of my normal routine. Every day I took a bus to work because my job was far from home. The house I lived in had belonged to my grandmother. Life hadn't exactly gone well for me financially, so living in a big city was never an option. My grandmother passed away a few years ago, and I never knew my parents. Every morning on my way to the bus stop, I passed an old church. It stood on the outskirts of the village, completely alone. No houses, no other buildings nearby. Just a ruined, abandoned church that had probably been falling apart since the Soviet era. I never paid much attention to it. As far as I was concerned, it was just an old building. It stood there, and that was that. Then a series of strange events began happening. First, some local troublemakers, teenagers who liked hanging around abandoned places, were found dead inside the church. 4 bodies, all of them lying there, with their eyes wide open. The fear frozen in their faces was horrifying. Even the police officers who came to collect the bodies seemed too desperate to leave as quickly as possible. People said they felt something inside the church, something wrong. The villagers were superstitious. They could come up with all sorts of stories. I was used to it and never took such things too seriously. Then came the second incident. Uncle Dmitro, a longtime friend of my grandmother and someone I knew well myself, disappeared one night. He was around 50 years old. His wife was terrified. She spent the entire night worrying, unable to sit still. The next morning he came home, or at least someone who looked like him did. He was pale, shaking, completely terrified. His own wife barely recognized him. The moment he walked through the door, he started making the sign of the cross over and over again. I'd never seen anything like it. The strange thing was that he had never been religious, not once in his life. Yet now he was muttering prayers non-stop. Everyone tried asking him what had happened, what did you see, but he refused to answer. He just kept crossing himself. The only thing anyone managed to get out of him, he and his friend had been wandering around the village, drunk, and had passed by the abandoned church. And then he wouldn't say another word. The only thing he told us was this: stay away from that church. Take the longest road possible if you have to. Never go near it. After that, he changed completely. He became withdrawn and stopped talking to people. His wife thought about taking him to a hospital, but she never got the chance. One day she left him alone while she went shopping. When she returned, she found him hanging from a tree in the yard. He had done it to himself. It was scary. Back then I didn't understand any of it. I figured maybe the man had simply drunk himself into madness. Maybe years of alcohol had finally broken him. But a few days ago, I finally understood. Everything started when our company organized a corporate party and invited me. I'm not a fan of those kind of events, but I didn't want to be the only co-worker who didn't show up. We stayed there late into the evening. I left a little earlier than everyone else because I needed to catch the last bus home. If I missed it, I'd either have to walk for hours or call a taxi, and these days, that's expensive. Eventually I got back to my village. The walk from the bus stop to my house Took around 15 minutes, and I figured the cool night air would do me some good. As I walked home, I passed the ruined church. I had a bit of alcohol in my system, when suddenly a young boy ran up to me. He couldn't have been older than 10. He wore old rags that made him look like he came from a homeless family. "Mister, could you please give me some money for bread?" he asked. I stopped. I've been taught since childhood that if you can help someone, you should. So I gave him enough money to buy a loaf of bread. "All right," I said, "here you go. But tell me something, kid. What are you doing out here this late at night?" The boy smiled. Then he snatched my wallet. It happened so fast that for a second I didn't even understand what had happened. The kid took off running. "Hey, get back here, you little brat! Thief!" I sobered up instantly and sprinted after him. For context, I kept a decent amount of cash in that wallet. I always carried it just in case, and I had no intention of losing it. On top of that, I was furious. I wanted to teach the little bastard a lesson. God, I wish I'd just gone home that night. I chased after him, shouting and cursing both him and myself for falling for such an obvious trick. Sure, you should help people when they are in need, but you should also remember that some people will stab you in the back the first chance they get. The boy was fast. In no time, he was gone, and that's when I realized I was standing inside the old church. A cold gust swept through my entire body. "Hey kid, give me my wallet back right now. It'll be worse for you if you don't," I shouted, but nobody answered. Moonlight poured through the shattered windows, illuminating the interior well enough for me to see. Damn it, I was certain he'd run in here. I'd followed him the whole way. He had to be hiding somewhere, the little creep. I started searching the church, checking every corner. All I wanted was my wallet back, so I could get out of there. "Do I need to call the police?" Then I heard something upstairs, the creak of furniture, as if someone had stepped on something. "Hey!" I looked up and saw the silhouette of the boy. He stared at me, then smiled. "For fuck's sake, you think I have time for your games?" I ran after him again. This time I climbed to the second floor. I nearly fell several times. The place was littered with old junk, and every step had to be taken carefully. When I reached the second floor, the boy was gone again. What the hell is this? Where did he go? I spent another 5 minutes wandering through the abandoned church, stepping over charred prayer books and piles of debris. Then I finally found him. The little bastard was standing in a dead end. There was nowhere left for him to run. Only walls surrounded him. He stood with his back to me. "Got you now, you little shit." I rushed forward and grabbed him by the shoulders. "Now you're going to pay for this." I spun him around and nearly lost consciousness from fear. The scene staring back at me was no longer the boy. His appearance had changed completely. I don't even know how to describe it properly. It looked like a corpse, a walking corpse. Its skin was completely burnt away, and its eyes. There were no eyes, just empty sockets. I stumbled backward. My whole body began shaking. My legs nearly gave out beneath me. What are you? That was all I managed to say. The creature slowly raised its charred hand and tossed my wallet onto the floor near my feet. Then, in a perfectly normal human voice, it said, "Here, you were looking for it, weren't you?" It paused. "Sorry, I just wanted someone to play with." To say I was scared would be an understatement. I was terrified, pure, overwhelming terror. I couldn't even blink, but eventually, instinct took over. I knew I had to get out of there. I grabbed the wallet and ran. Something slammed into me. I was thrown through the air. The next thing I knew, I had crashed onto the first floor. The impact was brutal. Pain exploded through my entire body. Whatever had hit me had literally launched me off the second floor. I was lucky not to black out. Somehow, I managed to get back on my feet. Then, I looked up. The boy was standing on the second floor, and beside him, something else. A creature, not a human being, I swear it. Something large stood next to him, adult-sized, much bigger than the child. I didn't get a good look at it, and honestly, I didn't want one. But two things burned themselves into my memory. Its horns, long horns, and its eyes, they glowed like lanterns in the darkness. I started making the sign of the cross. I don't even know why. My grandmother had always taught me that if you ever found yourself in a truly desperate situation, you should cross yourself and pray. The boy saw what I was doing. Then he spoke again. Look around. This place isn't for the living and your prayers. He smiled. God can't hear you here. After he said that, I finally noticed something I had completely overlooked when I first entered the church. The icons, every single one of them had been defaced, twisted, distorted. The faces of the saints had been transformed into something horrifying. They looked more like demons than holy figures. And the eyes in those painted faces seemed to be watching me. I screamed at the top of my lungs and bolted for the exit. Luckily, the entrance to the church wasn't blocked. I burst outside and ran toward my house. I ran without thinking, driven entirely by instinct. Any trace of alcohol was gone. All that remained was raw, animal fear. I barely remember making it back to my yard. I barely remember fumbling with my keys and unlocking the front door. I locked every lock I had. Then I shoved furniture against the entrance, pulled the curtains shut and barricaded myself inside. I curled up in the corner of my room. My entire body was trembling. I didn't know how to process what I'd seen. I didn't know how to understand it, how to believe my own eyes, or how to convince myself that I wasn't losing my mind. I stayed there until morning, until the roosters started crowing and sunlight began filtering through the windows. I called in sick to work. There was a bottle of vodka in the refrigerator. I drank it almost immediately. After that, my body simply gave up. I barely managed to stagger to my bed before collapsing onto it. But sleep brought no relief. The images wouldn't leave me alone. The burned boy, the horned creature standing beside him, the icons twisted into grotesque mockeries of what they once were. They followed me into every dream. I woke up after dark for a brief moment, a fraction of a second. I convinced myself it had all been a hallucination, a nightmare brought on by alcohol and fear. Then a shadow passed by my window, and I knew it had all been real. I shot upright in bed. The curtains were still closed. Outside, the moon shone brightly once again. Even through the curtains, I could clearly see a silhouette moving through my yard. Then I noticed something. The figure had horns. My heart nearly stopped. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Oh God, had they come for me? But why? What had I done to them? I'd never hurt anyone. No answers came. I slowly approached the window, crouched down and carefully pulled back the curtain, just enough to peek outside. They were there, the boy and the creature, standing only a few feet from my front door. I immediately backed away from the window. I grabbed my grandmother's icon, the real one, untouched and uncorrupted. Fear had taken complete control of me. I couldn't think rationally anymore. Then the knocking started, a loud, forceful pounding on my door. I simply sat down in front of it, the icon clutched tightly in my hands. I repeated every prayer I could remember, every prayer my grandmother had taught me. Maybe, just maybe, it would help. The knocking continued for hours. I didn't even notice time passing. Everything felt unreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Yet, I remained there, gripping the icon until the pounding finally stopped and the first rays of sunlight began to rise over the horizon. Even then, I didn't dare look outside, not at first. Eventually, I gathered enough courage to check. The yard was empty. They were gone. I needed a plan. I needed answers. The first thing I did was search the internet. There were countless stories similar to mine. The problem was figuring out which ones were real and which were nonsense. But eventually I found something. An old forum post. It claimed that abandoned places, especially churches, temples, and sites once used for rituals, should be avoided by all living people. According to the post, evil had often taken root in such places. Every abandoned site had its own history, its own reason for being abandoned, and sometimes the sin living there wasn't alone. Sometimes it shared the place with a trapped soul that had died there long ago. There was much more written in that post, but most of it isn't important to the story. One particular detail stood out. It said if an unclean spirit took something from you, you must never take it back. You were supposed to leave it as an offering, as payment. And then I remembered the wallet. That boy had stolen my wallet. I chased after him and taken it back. The wallet was still with me. What an idiot! But how was I supposed to know? The article also said if you had already reclaimed the item, you should return it during daylight hours. The article also said that if you had already reclaimed the item, you should return it during daylight hours when such creatures were weakest. Then you were supposed to pray and hope they left you alone. At that point, I was willing to believe absolutely anything. I grabbed the wallet and carried it back to the abandoned church. I didn't go inside. I threw it onto the doorstep alone with all the money inside. Just leave me alone! Then I turned and ran. The entire day was spent praying for forgiveness, praying for protection, praying that somehow everything would be alright. But it wasn't. That very night, the silhouettes appeared outside my window again. The knocking returned, the pounding on the doors, the tapping on the glass. And this time, it felt closer, much closer. It didn't leave me alone. And now, I don't think I have much time left. But while I still have a few minutes, I want to tell you this. Never, never enter abandoned churches. And if you do, don't repeat my mistake. If the sin living there wants something from you, let it have it. Because if you don't, you'll end up paying for it the same way I am with your life.